Welcome to Build. This is report from Finland, data-driven organizations in Azure.
My name is Vesa Tikkanen. I'm a data platform MVP from CON013.
And my name is Sakari Nahi, CEO at Azure, Microsoft Regional Director, and an Azure MVP. Today, we will be speaking about the following contents. We have a few words about Finland, then we have some words about data platforms. We have 4 scenarios we will try to run you through very quickly on how companies start using Azure on their way to becoming data-driven organizations. And then we have a few thoughts on what's next from our viewpoint. Let's get to it.
Yeah, few words about Finland. So Finland is the country which is on the top right corner on your screen. So if you compare the latitude about some other countries, it's as north as Greenland or Iceland. So yeah, very far up north. Finland is from the kind of amount of people that live in Finland. We are a very small country, which means that our companies are smaller than average sized companies in US or in Central Europe, which also means that we are quite heavily export driven country. So many of the companies in Finland actually trade abroad and are kind of dependent on other countries' economies also. From the kind of what type of persons are, Sakki has a few thoughts about that regarding the kind of how we work. We are very result oriented, so it's not something that we would think that we would do, but it's about the outcome that what we like to achieve. So what about that?
Yeah, with Finnish people, you usually don't have to talk too much. We like to get to the meat of the matter pretty quickly. We are quite technology oriented as a group. I would say we have a lot of engineers and we are quite literal minded. And there's ongoing jokes about how people in Finland don't know how to do marketing and don't know how to do sales. But I guess we might be able to build something nice every now and then.
We're also very cloud-focused country, so it's not just companies; it's actually government and kind of all type and size of entities that are focusing towards the cloud. So very cloud-oriented country,
for sure. And now, of course, Finland is going through the pandemic of COVID as well as the rest of the countries globally. And in Finland, it has been a little bit difficult. This is the regular way we wait at the bus stop, and now we have this new rule of 2 meters of distance, and we hope that we soon get back to the old 5 meter distance from another person. And it's difficult for me and Vesa here. Maybe you don't notice any of the awkwardness we have between us, but we are quite close to each other now.
That's actually kind of that picture is a real image from the standard Finnish morning from the bus stop.
Yes, bus stop it is. Yeah. So that's that about Finland. What about few words about data platform in general? What's very interesting with data platforms, as many organizations are thinking about bringing data to cloud, is that they seem to approach that from especially larger organizations from possibly many angles at the same time. And there we have different camps of people who think of different things, who think of different business needs. And there's people who are looking at creating decision-making tools, BI reports and stuff like that. And then there's people who like to develop applications or tools for salespeople or partners or maintenance crews or whatnot. And what's important as we go forward with this story of data platform is that these two camps traditionally might not have had a lot of discussion in the past. And now when we are thinking of building an enterprise-wide data platform, it would make sense that this single platform would serve both of these needs, the needs of decision makers and these operational needs. And this is something that we run into quite often that these two camps might not see eye to eye.
Yeah, and if we think about the kind of target architecture, so if we take Azure data platform architecture, this is a reference picture from the docs.microsoft.com, and it's quite many different services in the image. So that's
not enough. Yeah. Not enough. There should be more.
That's another point. So it's not something that companies could could switch immediately everything to this picture. So they start from somewhere, and at least in the smaller sized companies, they pick up the kind of low hanging fruits and take some services and then start from there. And that's I don't know if it's only a small size companies or how do you see that?
Well, I think that what we've seen is that it's not just small companies that pick and choose and try to take low-hanging fruits. I think even large companies, even if they're doing IoT cases and they are doing data warehousing and they are doing applications and APIs and all of that stuff, all of these teams seem to be starting with low-hanging fruits first. And that, of course, makes sense. But then it also makes sense that this is not the first picture you can build when you think of enterprise architecture. This Microsoft picture that misses a lot of services and still manages to look too complex to take at once.
Yeah. So if we think where the companies would start first, we would probably need to go back in the days that how things were when on the good old days. So if you think about data platform or kind of data warehousing scenario some decades ago, this was pretty much the picture. It's not an official Microsoft image.
Oh, I thought it totally looks like an official Microsoft image.
Icons are official Microsoft icons, but if you think about the architecture back in the days, it was heavily focused on the SQL Server offering. We have ETL tools inside SQL Server. We did some transformations and enriching of the data inside SQL Server. Then we offered the data through some modeled models through tabular models, for example, or OLAP cubes, and then finally we consumed the data via some reports, and kind of everything was just SQL Server. So that was easy. But then if we go or flip to the kind of new world, this is kind of the transformation that should be done. So not it's just one arrow, so not a big of a deal.
Yeah, but it seems like the current modern cloud can really replace SQL. So isn't that nice?
Yeah, to some extent it really is that when you grow from on-premise world, you can find things that will replace SQL Server. But on the other hand, you will get much more. So it's not just SQL that we are talking on the cloud edge. So where do BI and report companies, if that's the workload you are looking for, where will they start very commonly in Finland? So as said, the kind of easiest or those choices that will create business value as fast as possible, and then the obvious choice is that you will put reporting, you will enhance your reporting and modeling capabilities by taking advanced or taking use the Power BI and Power BI Premium. And now in Finland, the Power BI Premium per user licensing model is actually something that many companies are looking for, because on average there is not kind of thousands of employees in the company, which would make sense for the kind of Power BI Premium, standard Power BI Premium offering.
It does make sense. Does it start if a company is needing some BI reports? Do they start looking at the Power BI as a tool first, or do they start looking at the data platform underneath it?
Yeah, I would say that Power BI offering is a kind of, to some extent, a complete offering for the modeling and visualization layer. So they will replace very often or very soon the whole modeling and visualization layer. But as we saw on the previous slide, there are already modeling capabilities on the on-premise world. So kind of first easy steps would be to just take the visualization and then grow from there.
Just take Power BI and put it on top of the existing infrastructure.
Yes.
That is awesome. Now, from another point of view, not from this BI or reporting point of view, another company or the same company, but different group of people probably might be thinking about, hey, we need to add some velocity. We need to increase our innovation and we need to move faster. And then they're like to IT people, they're like, hey, how could you make this happen? What kind of capabilities do we need? And the IT department or division, they start thinking about APIs. Damn, we should have reusable APIs that we could securely give to some selected people, development teams, might be external, might be internal teams, that they could then call with their applications, that we could manage with API management. And beneath that API management would be concrete APIs. And beneath that, those APIs would be, of course, the data platform or separate data storages, whatever they are. In this Microsoft architecture diagram, we have Azure Cosmos DB, which is a great database if you think of documents and event-driven architectures and patterns. But of course, you could use regular SQL. There's all kinds of Azure Cognitive Search and time series insights, and there's a lot of cool different specialized storages there. And underneath all of this, there's Azure Data Lake, a object storage that you can use to store all of your raw data at a pretty nice price of, I don't know, less than 20 euros per month per terabyte for the hot storage. So that data lake is kind of a carrying theme throughout this whole thinking.
Do you see that data lake is something new, or is it replacing something on the on-premise world when companies are thinking about cloud?
If you look up the application developers, when they come to this cloud world from on-premises world, let's say like that, data lake is something old because the binaries need to be somewhere, right? So you need the hard drive for the images and pictures and documents and all of that. And basically data lake for a developer is just that. It's a dumb place to store your stuff. But it's also something new because suddenly the application developers might need to start thinking about, okay, this data lake is actually enterprise-wide, or this should build up into a data platform that is reusable for other application developers as well, or maybe even report creators for some Power BI usage. And that is very new thinking, and it's very difficult to get there with maybe even with the current thinking, but at least with the thinking that is 5 years old.
I completely agree.
I agree too.
I agree 3.
Nice. And then we get to the third case, which is in a way the easiest to understand because there's companies that are very relevant or reliant on getting data from devices, from IoT devices. These devices have sensors, maybe they're installed in some, I don't know, ship or plant or site or installation or whatnot. And the business has heard that data is the new oil, and we need to get the data for, I don't know, predictive maintenance, which is the old classic golden story of advanced analytics and machine learning, or whatever is it used for the SLA or forecasting sales or whatever. And now they are thinking of the red box in this architectural diagram. They're thinking of the processing of getting the data into Azure machine learning or Azure cognitive services, or maybe Azure Databricks, which is missing from this diagram, whatever, one of those tools you can use to do this advanced analytics. Now the business comes up with this, we need this value from data. And then what happens on the IT side is, of course, okay, we need this value from data. Before that, we need the data. So they start thinking about the ingestion, about, hey, Azure Event Hubs, do we need a maybe more cost-effective way of getting data, or IoT Hub? Do we need two-way communication, a little bit more secure, some more protocols? Do we actually need device or digital twins in the cloud so we could remotely manage our devices and all that stuff? Of course, the raw data goes to Azure Data Lake. Again, the same theme as in other stories. What's interesting with this IoT is that it starts with this value from data, and then there's a period of time when we just try to come up with a common understanding for getting the data into the cloud and managing devices and all that stuff. And at some point, of course, we get to proof of concepting the algorithm itself. It is quite interesting world because, of course, the processing part is something new, that the cloud is infinitely scalable, and right now in their on-prem hosting environment, it might be difficult to have enough capacity to do the processing. So this is just a path everybody has to go through if they are looking at getting data from sensors on site.
Yeah, and if we think about kind of the data processing or data warehousing, so the traditional analysis of the data, if the company has already kind of started the journey towards the cloud, they have picked up the Power BI Premium or Power BI capabilities, then what would they do next? And then actually referring to your SQL Server joke that can it replace or something, I see a big potential on the, and also many customers in Finland are looking forward for the Synapse Analytics offering, because what you will get there is the kind of traditional standard SQL endpoint. So kind of the SQL as you've always been familiar with, and then for 20 years or something. And now with the Synapse SQL endpoint, you can actually run your kind of non-traditional workloads, like querying over big data files or querying even from the non-relational databases via Synapse Link or similar things. So kind of very familiar endpoint, but you reach or enlarge all of your assets you can query over. So kind of Synapse T-SQL endpoint is something that customers are very interested in Finland. And then what it means that they will choose from the dedicated pools, they will choose between for some workloads, the on-demand query capabilities, and then we will come to the data lake. You mentioned the data lake is a big part in IoT and modern application workloads, but then on the analysis workloads, it's actually something very new. Traditionally, we stored everything in the databases. Now when going to the cloud, you no longer need to save everything to the kind of expensive database storage. You can just have files, which are of course needs to be in format that we can query over. But when we have the files on the data lake, we now have a kind of very familiar endpoint which we can use to query the data. So first they will look how can we use these assets we already have, or these kind of tools we already have, SQL endpoint. Then they will look for data lake related data, and after that they will grow from to right within the picture, so that they will start kind of using Spark activities and kind of other big data workloads. But definitely, like first, it's how can we move this on-premise infrastructure to the cloud, and then SQL or Synapse Analytics is actually a good option for that.
How confused are people with Synapse? Like it seems to be somehow a little bit hard to approach product or Azure service, because you go to Synapse and you're like, okay, cool, there's all kinds of stuff, and then there's like Azure Data Factory and Data Lake and SQL, and it's like, okay, these are very known to a lot of people. So what is this Synapse part really at? So what do you think? Is Synapse already well understood, or does Microsoft have a lot of work in educating companies on what is Synapse really good for?
Yeah, Synapse is actually a very wide offering. So as you said, there are ETL capabilities and other also included. But if you think about the original SQL Server image we had, we actually had also, its SQL Server was not just the database. It was a variety of tools, which actually, if you compare them tool by tool, they fit to the Synapse image. Probably not the Spark engine, but other than that, we have similar capabilities. So definitely, kind of, there is still things or message to be delivered and education to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of people, when you talk about them and point some parts of the Synapse, like the dedicated SQL pool or the on-demand SQL endpoint, then it's kind of starts from somewhere and then grows from there. So I would say that it's getting better. So
that's good to hear. And I also have one curveball more, which is now, for the last year, there's been a lot of talk about this architecture called Lakehouse.
Yeah.
And Databricks is talking about that. Snowflake is talking about that. And it's about having an object storage like Data Lake and having this Delta Lake abstraction on top of it. And there's really no SQL like as a database, as a physical storage. What do you think about the future? Do you believe that this Lakehouse architecture will take the market, or will it grow to be a real, very good choice that opposes the choice of using physical SQL storages?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, within at least when thinking about the traditional SQL server infrastructure, there are some limitations, mainly due to the fact that it was like heavily optimized for single server kind of one object or one computer type of architecture,
like
and
vertical scaling.
Yeah, vertical scaling. So now when new big data workloads come in, that's definitely like easier to scale in a cloud, because it's harder to get a bigger virtual machine, but it's easier to get multiple virtual machines or computation units. So definitely I'm towards that architecture, that where we probably have less connected databases. So it's not as physical implementation as is in the SQL server. So on-demand SQL on the Synapse today is a kind of very good way of approaching that. So everyone can query data. We have some metadata storage where we save the entities or kind of save the location of the data, but we are not heavily tied on top of some dedicated computation capacity. So definitely I'm looking forward for those things.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
Don't go the classic way, or if you do, know what you do.
Yeah.
So what do we have?
Yeah. So if we've now seen what the companies are currently doing, there's some things where companies are going next. So what do you think, kind of what would be the first step, what companies will do next?
I think, and this is reiteration, we basically said this already, but this thinking of one data platform, the understanding that it's an enterprise-wide entity, that all camps, whoever they are, whatever their end users or audience are, be they decision makers or salespeople, it's an application, it's an IoT thing or whatever, there's a single data platform vision that has this data so that we can grab that data and aggregate that data and get that value out of the data. I think that's future. I think the first companies that are successful in creating value out of data will be the kind of companies that understand that these old legacy camps need to be destroyed and the people will need to be driven to talk with each other more.
Yeah. And then if we think about kind of that story a bit further, then actually what's many customers in Finland are looking for is like, how can we share this data within our company more kind of to more people, and then how can we document and how can we promote or certify these data assets so that they are reusable or trusted sources, and their kind of investments in what Microsoft does in the Purview or even within the Power BI capabilities. It's something that I'm very much looking forward, because they are resonating among many customers, and they are, at least in Finland, looking forward for those.
Yeah, I think Purview is actually, it looks like many organizations are very interested in that capability. I think that kind of asset management and data governance is kind of missing from the I don't know, public cloud, Azure market.
But it's also missing from the on-premise world if you think.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
something new.
Yeah. So we talk about Finland and how companies are very dependent on the for first of all other countries, but then also from other companies. So within the supply chain, it's very common that in Finland we have kind of many small companies that just work together. So they are very dependent on each other, and it's starting to arise. There is the need, or kind of customers are starting to ask that how can we actually share the data and visibility among that supply chain. So I think that that's a next big thing in very near future under many industries, that where the new kind of value comes from the sharing of the data. So it's not just that we put firewalls and it's our data and we try to optimize without knowing how the world looks like abroad, but then it's more let's share to our partners so that they can optimize and help us going forward.
I agree 100%. The difficulty there is, of course, there's company A with SAP, there's company B with SAP, and now they should somehow collaborate on the process level. And it's gonna, like, many companies are thinking about this, but then it's like, okay, how do we get all of these, our partners with us? And if we start doing this first, it's gonna take like 2 years to be able to offer something. But I think the groups of companies that get there first will be more efficient than those groups who don't get there. So I think actually this is a big thing.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, of course, on the one we spoke about on how it might be difficult to get to the point of having the machine learning algorithm or advanced analytics running in the cloud, and companies do proof of concepts and spikes, and they see the value in that. And once they have something that is meaningful for the business, what they might be missing is the maturity of the process, the ways of working that guarantee that there's incremental improvement on the algorithm, and we can test those hypotheses and do different training models, and then having different scores and all of that stuff. And MLOps is the answer to all of that stuff. And it seems that we are now at a point in Finland where a lot of companies are starting to get value from these algorithms, from this machine learning, let's say, and now they are at a point of actually thinking, okay, we are expanding this capability. It's a mess. It's like it's a mess. It's not. We don't feel it's managed, and MLOps is the answer to that. And it seems to be the way that we first need to see some value out of the practice before we organize that way of working. So that's a big thing for the next year or two, that many companies will be improving.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Yes.
We have like 1 minute or something for the questions if they arise. We put kind of our personal contact details, and you can easily find them from the social media channel. So if you kind of want to ask something definitely contact, and we will answer. And if there is something already been asked, someone can probably query those or say them out loud.
For sure.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. We have 3 questions that came through. So I'll start with the first one. How is it that in Finland, the cloud seems to be the natural choice? Do you have any advice for countries where the cloud still is seen like the devil?
That's a good question. I've been looking at these countries in Europe a little bit and how they are progressing, and I kind of agree with the question maker that Finland may be half a year or a year ahead of some countries in Europe, and it started very fast in Finland that many companies started to get rid of their existing hosting data centers or hosting models and started moving the infrastructure to cloud, So that's the regular path. Of course, infrastructure first and then application innovation second. And there's a bunch of different stuff there in between. But the infrastructure was done, or it's not done, of course, but it started. There's a lot of stuff that was done quite fast. And then many companies started innovating. And I think once we got some stories of success from that, the rest of the companies started following. I don't know if do you have...
Finnish people are kind of trusting everyone. So first of all, kind of, it's not like our data or something. We trust each other, even though we sit apart or stand apart, we trust everyone. And I would say that's one of the key things. So the kind of culture is not something that is preventing us going forward. And as said, even the government is very heavily cloud focused in Finland. So,
and there's probably a lot of technically minded people in Finland. So when something cool like a cloudification hyper trend came through, then it felt like, but it's a difficult question. We are sorry we don't have a better answer.
Samantha, are we running out of time or do we have time for one question?
You tell us. We have time.
Yeah.
We have nothing.
We are 1 minute over, but there's only 2 other questions that came through. So if you have a couple minutes.
Yes.
The next question is, what is the benefit of using Azure Synapse when we already have Data Factory, SQL Server, Data Lake, Databricks deployed? We have knowledge of the separate components and have a development strategy based on that. What would be the benefit of using Synapse?
Yeah, and that's also a good question, that if those kind of offerings are competing or against each other, or are they actually kind of fulfilling, or can they exist together? And I'm looking more of the later one. So basically, from those kind of tools mentioned, the Data Factory is one-to-one mapping with Synapse. So there, if you already have a Data Factory pipelines available, you can migrate them to Synapse if it makes sense or not. Why would it make sense? Is that if you need other capabilities in the Synapse, then you could integrate everything into the one place. So that definitely makes sense. But then regarding, for example, Databricks and Synapse Spark, I don't see them kind of, they are overlapping, of course. They are Spark and computation engines, but they are not like competing, or it's one or the other. I have many customers that are using both of them. So for kind of Synapse integrated workloads where you want to create some or transform some data and expose that via T-SQL endpoint, it makes completely sense to create a Spark table inside Synapse and expose that with the T-SQL. So on the other hand, on the Databricks, we have a lot of kind of other capabilities and already the Spark engine in Databricks is some steps ahead. So for some other workloads, it makes definitely more sense to use Databricks. And as said, as both of those engines run on top of the data lake, they can coexist in like easily. So I would say they can coexist. There is no competition.
I think to add some to that, Synapse has the more powerful unified view thingy. So there's for a person who's working with Synapse, they have more capability of seeing across these different offerings and seeing the whole pipeline. So if that's a goal, that might be something worth noting for. At the same time, right now, like Vesa said, Synapse is not up to speed. For example, if we look at if you are using Delta Lake inside your Databricks, for example, the Delta Lake engine in Azure Databricks is newer version than what it has in Synapse right now. So Synapse is not up to speed. It's not as mature in that kind of lakehouse architecture thinking yet. So that might be a small reason to not go with Synapse yet. And then the third thing is, of course, the clusters. For example, Databricks isn't that cheap of a service. And if you want to focus your data and focus your costs, then that is one reason to think of focusing on either or kind of scenario. I think Vesa is right, and there's no competition, but there are these different areas to consider that might be meaningful in your case. Again, excellent answer. Very, very exhaustive. We just have the facts.
Samantha, did we have a third one?
Yes, so we did have another question, but we are already 5 minutes over.
Yeah.
So we can always respond to those in the chat after. Not sure if there's any closing words that you have, and we can go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for following, and thank you for questions. And the last question, we're going to check it out, and we can, for example, tweet it out or something if it's something we can fit in a tweet.
Yeah.
Like it depends, or we don't know.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice build.